Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Lakeview, Illinois. My name is Taylor Ashford. I'm 27 years old, and I'm the person my family tried to erase from existence. Not because I did something wrong, but because I inherited something they believed belonged to them. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand the kind of family I come from, to understand the kind of betrayal I survived. The Ashfords are old money, not just comfortable, not just wealthy. The kind of rich where your last name opens doors before you even knock. My grandfather, Edmund Ashford, built a real estate empire across the Midwest, but his true love was always art. He collected paintings the way other people collect stamps, obsessively, joyfully, with a reverence that bordered on spiritual. His estate in Lakeview sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds, and inside those walls hung canvases worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. Monets, a small Vermeer sketch, works by contemporary artists he championed before anyone else noticed them. And then there was me, the quiet one, the strange one, the one who sat in the corner of family gatherings with charcoal-stained fingers, sketching faces in a worn notebook, while my older brother, Ethan, commanded every room he walked into. Ethan was the golden child, 31, confident, with a jaw that could cut glass and a smile that made people forget he'd just insulted them. He went into real estate like our grandfather, except Ethan didn't have Grandpa Edmund's patience or his instinct. What Ethan had was our parents, Margaret and Richard Ashford, who treated him like the sun around which the family orbited. My mother, Margaret, was the architect of the family image. Every holiday photo was curated. Every public appearance was choreographed. She wore her pearls like armor and her smile like a weapon. My father, Richard, was quieter, but no less dangerous. He was the kind of man who could dismantle your self-worth with a single raised eyebrow over dinner. And me? I painted. I went to art school on a partial scholarship because my parents said funding a hobby wasn't a wise investment. I worked part-time at a frame shop. I lived in a studio apartment with a leaking faucet and a fire escape I used as a balcony. And every Sunday afternoon, without fail, I drove to my grandfather's estate and painted beside him. He understood me. He was the only one who ever did. "Taylor," he told me once, his voice like warm gravel, "your brother collects things to own them. You create things to free them. That's the difference. Don't ever let them make you forget that." I didn't understand what he meant, not until the reading of his will. Grandpa Edmund passed on a Tuesday in October, quietly, in his sleep, the way he always said he wanted to go. The funeral was enormous. Half the city came. My mother wore a black hat with a veil, like she was auditioning for a period drama. Ethan gave a eulogy that was more about himself than our grandfather. I sat in the second row and tried not to fall apart. 3 weeks later, the family gathered in the wood-paneled office of Arthur Greenfield, Grandpa Edmund's attorney for over 30 years. I remember the smell of old leather and lemon polish. I remember the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. And I remember the exact moment the air left the room. Arthur cleared his throat and read, "To my granddaughter, Taylor Elise Ashford, I bequeath the entirety of my estate, including the Lakeview property, my complete art collection, and the remaining liquid assets of my personal trust, valued at approximately $14.3 million. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that comes right before an explosion. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, tell me, What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel. Ethan received a modest trust, enough to live comfortably, not lavishly. My parents received nothing. Grandpa Edmund had written a personal letter to Arthur, explaining that Margaret and Richard had been given more than enough opportunity and support throughout their lives, and that the estate should go to the one who would honor its spirit, not liquidate its soul. My mother's face went white, not with grief, with rage. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. Edmund wasn't in his right mind toward the end. Everyone knew that. Arthur Greenfield looked at her over his reading glasses. "Mrs. Ashford, your father-in-law was evaluated by 2 independent physicians within the last year of his life. He was of entirely sound mind." My father placed a hand on my mother's arm, not to comfort her, to restrain her. In public, the Ashfords never cracked. That came later, behind closed doors. Ethan didn't say a word during the reading. He just stared at me. And in that stare, I saw something I'd never seen from my brother before. Not jealousy, not anger, something colder, something that looked like calculation. That night, my mother called me. Her voice was calm, controlled, the way it always was when she was most dangerous. "Taylor, sweetheart, we need to talk about this as a family. Your grandfather was sentimental, but he wasn't practical. You don't know how to manage an estate of this size. Ethan has the business experience. Your father and I can guide." "Grandpa chose me, Mom," I said quietly. The line went silent for 3 heartbeats. "We'll see about that," she said, and she hung up. I stood in my studio apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air. My chest felt tight, my hands were shaking, because I knew my mother. I knew that tone. It wasn't a conversation, it was a declaration of war. I had no idea that what my family was planning behind those closed doors, the lawyers, the lies, the trap they were building to spring on me in open court, would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and blood. And I had absolutely no idea that one question from a judge would bring all of it crashing down on their heads. The weeks after the will reading were a slow-motion ambush. At first it was subtle. My mother started calling relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunts, cousins, family friends. Suddenly everyone was concerned about me, concerned about my isolation, concerned about my fragile temperament, concerned about whether a 27-year-old artist was really equipped to manage a multi-million-dollar estate. I knew what she was doing. She was building a narrative, laying groundwork, planting seeds in every ear that would listen, so that when the time came, she'd have a chorus of voices echoing her story. Taylor is unstable. Taylor cannot handle this. Taylor needs help. The first real blow came on a Wednesday evening. I'd been spending more time at Grandpa Edmund's estate, my estate now, though it still felt strange to say, setting up a proper studio in the East Wing. I was working on a portrait of him, painting from memory and photographs, trying to capture the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way his hands looked holding a paintbrush. It was the most important piece I'd ever attempted. I left the estate at 9 that night. When I came back the next morning, the studio had been ransacked. Canvases slashed, paint thrown across the walls, and the portrait, my unfinished portrait of Grandpa Edmund, had been cut from corner to corner with something sharp, a box cutter maybe, or a knife. The wound ran diagonally across his face, splitting the image in 2. I sank to the floor and I couldn't breathe. My chest caved inward like someone had reached inside and squeezed. I pressed my palms against the cold hardwood and I sobbed. Ugly, shaking sobs that echoed off the high ceilings of that beautiful, ruined room. The security footage was conveniently corrupted, but I knew. I knew it was Ethan. I knew it in my bones. 2 days later, my mother arranged what she called a wellness check. 2 men I'd never met showed up at the estate with paperwork claiming I was a danger to myself. My mother had convinced a family physician, Dr. Harold Pennington, a man who'd been accepting my parents' generous donations for decades, to sign a psychiatric hold order. I was taken to Ridgehaven Behavioral Health Center, against my will, in the back of a car with locked doors. I remember pressing my forehead against the window and watching the trees blur past, thinking, this is what they do. This is how they win. They don't fight you. They erase you. I spent 4 days at Ridgehaven before my friend Lily Nakamura, the only person outside the Ashford orbit I truly trusted, found out what happened and intervened. Lily was a paralegal, sharp as a tack and twice as stubborn. She contacted an independent psychiatrist, Dr. Ananya Patel, who evaluated me and produced clean medical records. No psychosis, no delusions, no danger to self or others. I was released. Standing outside Ridgehaven in clothes that smelled like institutional detergent, blinking against the autumn sunlight, I felt something shift inside me, like a bone resetting after a break. Painful, but necessary. They're not going to stop, Lily said, standing beside her car with her arms crossed. I know. So what are you going to do? I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of my family. I felt clear. I'm going to let them think they're winning. Lily raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. Only for them. 3 days after my release, my mother called. Her voice was warm, almost maternal, a performance so practiced it nearly sounded real. Taylor, darling, we feel terrible about the misunderstanding. We were just worried about you. Let's have dinner, all of us. A real family dinner, like we used to. We can talk through everything. No lawyers, no paperwork, just family. Every instinct screamed, trap. But that was exactly why I said yes. The night before the dinner, I sat in Lily's apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and legal documents. She'd been researching recording consent laws in Illinois. One-party consent. I only needed my own permission to record. If they say anything incriminating, you'll have it, Lily said. I bought a small camera, barely larger than a button, and wired it into the collar of my blouse. I practiced walking, sitting, leaning forward, making sure the angle captured the room. I tested the audio. I charged the battery twice. Then I drove to my parents' house. The dining room looked like a magazine spread. White tablecloth, crystal glasses, my mother's signature roast. Ethan sat at the far end of the table in a cashmere sweater, looking relaxed in the way predators look relaxed, still, watchful, conserving energy. My father poured the wine. He handed me a glass with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. To family, he said. I raised the glass to my lips, and I smelled it. Faint, almost imperceptible beneath the tannins of the Cabernet. But it was there, a bitterness that didn't belong, chemical, medicinal. My heart hammered, but I kept my face neutral. I pretended to sip. I set the glass down, and I waited. 30 minutes into dinner, I let my eyelids droop. I slowed my speech. I let my head nod forward, then catch, then not again. I was performing the role they'd written for me, the sedated, compliant Taylor who would sign anything they put in front of her, and they bought it, completely. "She's fading," Ethan said, his voice low. My mother stood and retrieved a folder from the sideboard. Legal documents, power of attorney, a declaration of mental incompetence, already half filled in. "We just need her signature," Margaret said. "Dr. Pennington's statement is already filed. Once she signs, we petition the court, and this whole mess is resolved by Christmas." "And the estate?" my father asked. "Sold within 6 months. The art collection alone will cover Ethan's development loans. The property is worth $40 million in the right market," Ethan said. "I already have 3 buyers interested." They talked over me, around me, about me, as if I were furniture, as if I were already gone. I recorded every word. The next morning, I woke up in Lily's apartment with a hard drive full of evidence and a fire in my chest that could have lit the whole city. For the first time in 27 years, I wasn't trying to earn my family's love. I was done performing for people who only saw me when they needed something to consume. It was time to fight. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of preparation, strategy, and silence. My family mistook my quiet for surrender. They filed a probate petition seeking to have me declared mentally incompetent and to transfer management of Grandpa Edmund's estate to a family-appointed conservator, which, conveniently, would be my mother. Their attorney was Victor Hale, a man whose reputation preceded him like a thunderclap. Silver-haired, deep-voiced, the kind of lawyer who made judges sit up straighter. My parents spared no expense. I hired Clara Whitfield. She was younger than Hale, less theatrical, and vastly underestimated. She wore simple suits and spoke in measured tones, but behind those calm eyes was a mind like a steel trap. Lily found her through a network of family law advocates, and from the moment Clara read the case file, she looked at me and said, "They're going to regret this." In those 6 weeks, I documented everything. The vandalized studio, the corrupted security footage, my medical records from Ridgehaven, Dr. Patel's independent evaluation, and of course, the dinner recordings. Clara had them authenticated by a forensic audio specialist. Every word, every admission, every frame of my family plotting over roast beef and drugged wine. Have you ever walked into a room knowing that everything was about to change? Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like a dam breaking. That's how it felt walking into the Lakeview County Courthouse on a gray morning in December. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. My parents sat on the opposite side of the aisle, dressed impeccably. Margaret in a charcoal suit, Richard in a navy blazer, Ethan in a tie I recognized as Grandpa Edmund's. That detail made my stomach clench. Judge Patricia Moreno presided. She was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and no tolerance for performance. I could tell that immediately. Victor Hale presented the family's case with surgical precision. He painted a portrait of me that was almost unrecognizable. A troubled young woman, isolated, prone to emotional episodes, unable to manage basic responsibilities, let alone a multi-million-dollar estate. He produced Dr. Pennington's statement. He cited my voluntary admission to Ridgehaven. He called my parents as witnesses, and they were flawless. Margaret's voice cracked at all the right moments. Richard spoke with the quiet gravity of a concerned father. Ethan testified that he'd found me talking to myself in the studio, that I'd become obsessive and disconnected from reality. I sat there and listened to my family lie about me under oath. My hands were folded in my lap, perfectly still, though underneath the table my nails dug crescents into my palms. Clara had warned me, show nothing, let them perform, let them feel safe. Hale concluded his presentation with a flourish. Your Honor, we are not here out of malice. We are here out of love. This family simply wants to protect one of its most vulnerable members and ensure that Edmund Ashford's legacy is preserved responsibly. Judge Moreno looked at him over her glasses, then turned to Clara. Counselor Whitfield, your response? Clara stood. She adjusted her glasses, and she said something that made the temperature in the room drop 5 degrees. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence a series of audio-visual recordings made by Miss Ashford on October 14th of this year, during a family dinner at the Ashford residence. These recordings were made in full compliance with Illinois' one-party consent statute. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Ethan's face. The color didn't drain from it all at once. It left in stages, like water receding from a shore. First the cheeks, then the lips, then the eyes, which went wide and fixed on me with a look I will never forget. Not anger, not fear, but the dawning, horrifying realization that he had been outplayed. Clara played the recordings. The courtroom heard my mother discussing the power of attorney documents, my father calculating the estate's liquidation value, Ethan's casual mention of prearranged buyers, and the most damning moment of all, Margaret's voice, clear as a bell, saying, Dr. Pennington's statement is already filed. Once she signs, we petition the court, and this whole mess is resolved by Christmas. Judge Moreno listened with an expression carved from stone. When the recording ended, she looked at my family for a long moment. Then she turned to Ethan. Mr. Ashford, she said, her voice measured and deliberate, did you, at any point, enter the Lakeview estate and damage property belonging to your sister, specifically, artwork within her studio? One question. That was all it took. Ethan's lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but Ethan was already unraveling. His composure cracked like thin ice. He stammered, he hedged. And then Clara produced the second piece of evidence, a receipt from a hardware store 2 blocks from the estate, purchased on Ethan's credit card the day before the vandalism. Box cutters, 2 of them. Your Honor, Clara said, I'd also like to direct the court's attention to Article 7, Section 3 of Edmund Ashford's will, which states, any beneficiary who willfully damages, destroys, or defaces property belonging to the estate, including artwork, shall forfeit all remaining bequests and distributions. Ethan's modest trust, the only thing Grandpa Edmund had left him, evaporated in that sentence. My mother stood up. Victor Hale tried to stop her, but Margaret Ashford was not a woman who was stopped. This is entrapment, she hissed. She manipulated. Mrs. Ashford, Judge Moreno said, and her voice could have frozen a river. Sit down. Now. Margaret sat. The judge dismissed the incompetency petition. She referred the matter of the forged psychiatric hold to the district attorney's office. She noted potential charges including fraud, filing false medical documents, and conspiracy to defraud a probate court. Within hours, my parents and Ethan were taken into custody for processing. I walked out of that courthouse into the December air, and for the first time in months, I breathed all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. Clara walked beside me, her heels clicking on the stone steps. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. Free, I said. Knowing that my family was facing real consequences should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like grief wearing a different mask. I had won. But winning against your own family doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. And survival, I was learning, was its own kind of beginning. 6 months later, the estate was unrecognizable, not because it had changed, but because its purpose had. I named it the Edmund Ashford Artist Retreat. The East Wing, where my studio had been ransacked, was rebuilt with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. The West Wing housed 12 residencies for emerging artists, painters, sculptors, photographers, writers, selected through a program Lily helped me design. We prioritized creators from backgrounds like mine, people who'd been told their art wasn't practical, wasn't valuable, wasn't enough. The grounds were open to the public on weekends. Families walked through the sculpture garden. Children sat on the lawn and drew with crayons. Local schools arranged field trips. The art collection remained intact, displayed throughout the main house exactly as Grandpa Edmund had arranged it, with plaques telling the story of each piece and the artist behind it. Standing in the main gallery one morning, watching a group of high school students sketch a Monet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Wholeness. Not happiness exactly. Happiness still came and went like weather. But wholeness. The sense that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. The legal aftermath of the courtroom unfolded slowly, the way justice does when it's real and not cinematic. My mother and father accepted plea deals, reduced charges in exchange for guilty pleas to conspiracy to defraud the probate court. Margaret received 18 months of probation and community service. Richard received the same. Dr. Pennington lost his medical license. Victor Hale faced a Bar Association inquiry for knowingly presenting fraudulent evidence. Ethan's case was more complicated. The vandalism charge stuck. The forfeiture clause in the will was upheld. He owed restitution for the destroyed artwork, which his depleted accounts could barely cover. The last I heard, he was living in a rental in the suburbs, working for a mid-tier development firm. A far cry from the empire he'd imagined building with my grandfather's money. I grieved for him. I know that sounds strange, but I grieved for the brother who taught me to ride a bike when I was 6, the boy who used to make shadow puppets on my bedroom wall during thunderstorms. Somewhere between that boy and the man who slashed my grandfather's portrait, something had broken in Ethan, and I couldn't fix it. I couldn't even reach it. Have you ever mourned someone who's still alive? That's the cruelest kind of grief. There's no funeral, no closure, just the aching awareness that the person you loved has become someone you don't recognize. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Plain envelope, no return address. But I recognized my mother's handwriting, the sharp, elegant cursive she'd perfected at finishing school. I opened it standing in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. Taylor, it read. I know you believe you did the right thing. Perhaps you did, by your own measure. But you've dismantled this family. Your father barely speaks. Ethan is struggling. And I am your mother. Whatever you think of me, I carried you. I raised you. I loved you in the only way I knew how. I'm asking you, not as the woman you saw in that courtroom, but as your mother. Can we try again? Can we sit down, just the two of us, and find our way back to something? I'm not asking for the estate. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for my daughter. I read it 3 times. The first time, the words blurred. The second time, my hands shook. The third time, I was still. It was a beautiful letter, carefully constructed, every sentence calibrated to land exactly where it would hurt the most. And I recognized the craftsmanship because I'd grown up watching my mother build sentences like weapons, elegant, precise, and aimed at the softest part of you. But here's what I also recognized. A part of it was real. Not all of it, maybe not even most of it, but somewhere underneath the manipulation, there was a woman who had lost her daughter and felt the absence. I believe that. I have to believe that, because the alternative, that my mother felt nothing, is a thought I am not willing to carry. I sat down at my grandfather's desk, my desk now, and I wrote back. It took me 2 hours and 11 drafts. Mom, I read your letter, and I want you to know that I heard you. Not just the words, but what's underneath them. I hope you're well. I hope Dad is finding peace in whatever form it comes, and I hope Ethan finds his footing. But I am not able to come back. Not because I don't love you. I do, in the complicated, bruised way that children of difficult parents always do. But because coming back means becoming the person I was before, and that person was disappearing. You didn't see it. Maybe you couldn't. But I was vanishing inside that family, and the only way I survived was by leaving. I wish you healing. I wish you clarity, and I wish you well. But I wish you those things from here, from a distance where I can breathe. Your daughter, Taylor. I sealed the envelope, I mailed it, and I let go. Not of the grief, that stays. Not of the love, that stays too, stubborn and inconvenient as it is. But I let go of the need to be seen by people who only ever looked through me, the need to be chosen by people who had already made their choice a long time ago. There's a painting hanging in the main gallery of the retreat now. It's the portrait of Grandpa Edmund, the one Ethan slashed. I had it professionally restored, but I asked the conservator to leave a trace of the damage visible. A faint line, diagonal, running across the canvas like a scar. Because the painting isn't just a portrait anymore. It's a testament to what was broken, to what survived, to the truth that beauty doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. Visitors ask about it sometimes. What happened to this one, they say, pointing at the scar. And I tell them, someone tried to destroy it, but it's still here. So after everything you've heard, if you were standing where I am now, with your own family asking you to come back, to forgive, to pretend the wounds don't exist, would you open that door and call it love? Or would you build a new one and call it freedom? I made my choice, and for the first time in my life, it was mine to make. And that's where Taylor's story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with a woman standing in her own light for the very first time. Her family hired a lawyer to destroy her. They drugged her wine. They slashed her grandfather's portrait. They locked her in a psychiatric facility. They stood in a courtroom and lied under oath, all because they believed her silence meant she was weak. But silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous one, not because they're plotting harm, but because they're done accepting it. Taylor didn't destroy her family. They destroyed themselves. She just stopped catching them when they fell. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. What would you have done if your own parents tried to have you declared mentally unfit just to steal your inheritance? Would you have forgiven them? Would you have walked away? Or would you have done exactly what Taylor did? sat at that dinner table, smiled, and let them bury themselves with their own words. And if this story hit you in the chest, if it reminded you of someone in your life who tried to make you small so they could stay comfortable, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, because every single week we bring you stories just like this one. Stories about people who were underestimated, overlooked, and betrayed, and who came back stronger than anyone imagined. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Sometimes one story can change how someone sees their own situation. Until next time, protect your peace, guard your boundaries, and never forget, the people who try hardest to control you are the ones who fear most what happens when you're free. This has been Untold Revenge Files. I'll see you in the next one.